Are we ready?
We're going. We are live.
Cool. Thank you. Welcome everybody to the UU Church of Tullahoma. Today our speaker will be myself, talking about the theory of evolution. We're going to start off with our chalice lighting, and let me pull that up for us. And today's chalice lighting is from the UUA itself. It's the monthly chalice lighting thing that they put out. We light this flame as a reminder of our mission of being a light in the world, in unity with those who came before us, with whom we are a spiritual family. We shall be able to commit to the building of a community of free faith beyond geographical limits and personal beliefs. May we be a shelter to all who need it the most. Amen. Try to light my hand on fire. Okay, announcements.
Jim has an announcement.
Go ahead, Jim.
The board will get together just for a few minutes right after church, just to select a new date, reschedule the picnic. So not really a board meeting, but just a very short get together to reschedule. So that's it.
Okay. Any other announcements?
Chuck has his hand up.
Go ahead, Chuck.
You're muted, Chuck.
Yep. Once again, surprisingly enough, the Thursday night discussion group will meet via Zoom on Thursday night at 7 o'clock. If you need a link, let me know, or you could get it from Tony or Peter or Patty, or probably not Rick, because he usually has to ask me what the link is, but other than that. So join us, we have fun.
Also, the Tuesday night therapeutic writing group, our 10 weeks had come to an end. I know that the nonviolent communication group will be starting up again soon, if I'm correct. And then when they are done with their next session, then the therapeutic writing group will take up another few weeks if the board approves so. Any other joys or any other announcements?
So just a comment on nonviolent communication. If there's interest, there'll be another group, but it's probably going to be later on. I would guess
January.
Probably January. We started last year in January, and we don't know for sure, but that's sort of what it looks like right now.
Okay.
Jean has a comment.
Go ahead, Jean. You're muted, Jean.
The Tullahoma Fine Arts Center is going to start having cooking classes within the next month or so. So I'm excited about it. Anyway, I'm going to be pretty hungry by then.
Well, you're supposed to eat before the cooking.
Yeah, you're
class.
allowed to eat between now and then.
Yeah. You don't want to go to a cooking class hungry, but any other announcements?
Just one more comment on the COVID numbers, and Chuck may want to add to this, but they're still going up. I think last week our 7-county weighted average was 45 cases per 100,000, and I think it's 63 now this week. So it's continuing to go up.
It is.
And is this, Chuck, does this look like this is going to be a yearly wave thing that it happens around this time every year?
I don't think so. This is just Delta. This is just a new variant coming along and wafting through us. And with any luck, it will come, it will pass, and we'll be okay unless another new variant comes out or something.
Well, I'll tell you what, the talking about the variants on it, that's going to lead well into the talk today. Do we have any other announcements? No? Okay, I'm going to read our responsive reading. Okay, this is called Blessings on Those Staying Home. We're staying home. Love has never asked this of us before. We're staying home. This is our gift to humanity. Let us wish each other well. For those staying home alone, I offer you this blessing. May you grow a deeper understanding of your own worth. Dear one, leaven the aloneness with gentle care. 1 second. For this too shall pass. May you be blessed with a peace and serenity. May you find the courage to reach out to hear another's voice and to remember others need you too. May you be well. For those staying home together, I offer you this blessing. May you find moments of patience and grace in your relations. May you offer each other enough time apart, reassurance and space enough to cry, to safely rage, for this too shall pass. Then let peace come again into your home. May you see one another's whole self as a gift, and may you be well. For those working from home, I offer you this blessing. May you remember to take breaks. May you find the means to relish your imperfection and the imperfection of others as evidence of our shared humanity. You are enough even when there isn't enough. Make order in your days and then let it go. May you be well. For those staying home with children, I offer you this blessing. May you find humor and compassion in your days. There will be learning of a different kind, deeper, no doubt, unexpected for sure. May there be patience and forgiveness again and again and again. For this too shall pass. May you all remember that the deep love that brought your family into being. May there be peace and understanding in your home. May you be well. May we be well, and may it be so. And so, without further ado, I'm going to transition into our talk today, which is about the theory of evolution. And if you guys can't hear me because I'm off screen, let me know, please. So, what is evolution? In biology, evolution is the changing characteristics of a species over several generations and relies on the process of natural selection. The theory of evolution is based on the idea that all species are related and gradually change over time. Evolution also relies on there being genetic variation in a population which affects the physical characteristics or phenotype of an organism. Some of these characteristics may give the individual an advantage over other individuals, which they can then pass on to their offspring, whether it be through nature or nurture. Now, what is natural selection? Charles Darwin's theory of evolution states that evolution happens by natural selection. Individuals in a species show variation in physical characteristics. This variation is because of differences in their genes. Individuals with characteristics best suited to their environment are more likely to survive finding food, avoiding predators, and resisting disease. These individuals are more likely to reproduce and pass their genes on to their children. Now, on that note, when it says suited to their environment and more likely to survive, there is a tribe of native Hispanics down in Mexico that live up in a canyon, the top of a canyon mountain range. And they are suited for living with the scarcity that is provided around them at the high altitude, and, being very physical in order to survive and, eating a lot of fatty things in order to store that energy for the times when food is scarce. So nowadays, there's a lot of these individuals from that tribe that are moving to, say, Chihuahua, Mexico, and they are becoming supremely obese, diabetic, stagnant, and it's because their bodies had evolved along however long to be adapted to the climate that they lived in, and now they're living in this sedentary life where they're still taking in the same amount of fats and sugars, but they're not expending that energy. They're not taking in the right types of fats and sugars. So just the switch within one generation of those individuals moving to an urban area has really affected their ability to maintain a healthy lifestyle. And over time, they're going to pass certain genes on because of that, say diabetes, which becomes kind of a genetic marker and predisposed to pass on to children. Individuals that are poorly adapted to their environment are less likely to survive and reproduce. Therefore, their genes are less likely to be passed on to the next generation. And as a consequence, those individuals most suited to their environment survive, and given enough time, the species will gradually evolve. Now, natural selection in action. There are 13 types of, this is the example that I'm going to give, the first one anyway. There are 13 types of Galapagos finches, also known as Darwin's finches. And they share the same habits, the same characteristics, but there's one genetic difference amongst all 13 types. All 13 of them have different beaks. The differences in their beaks might be the most important aspect of their survival, though. Two documented examples of the survival occurred in the late 1970s and 80s. First, when a large drought affected the island, the Galapagos Islands, in 1977, and seeds became scarce. Finches with the largest and toughest beaks were able to eat larger seeds that weren't typically part of their diet. As a result, they survived. So the finches with smaller beaks were unable to crack the tough seeds, and many died. Through the process of natural selection, the birds that were able to adapt reproduced and thrived, while genetically changing or evolving their appearance, their abilities, in order to be able to crack those tougher seeds. While the others dwindled in number, however, adaptation can go both ways. So, as was seen during the rainy weather in 1984 and 85, the heavy rains that created more of the small, soft seeds and fewer of the larger ones. This time, more birds with the smaller beaks survived and produced more offspring than the ones with the tougher beaks. So there's a balance in there, and it shows just how adaptable one type of species can be. So a number of these studies have been done on lizards as well to determine natural selection. One experiment temporarily eliminated the lizard's natural predators from a particular area, and the scientists observed what impact that had on the lizards. The surprising find was that it's not so much the predator's influence, the death or survival of certain lizards. Instead, the smaller lizards were more likely to die off anyway, despite the lack of natural predators, because the larger, stronger lizards in the area still had better access to food. They had longer legs. They were able to climb better, escape when floods or storms were coming through, reach food that wasn't available down below. So those smaller lizards in those certain areas were not able to adapt to that. Now, the question is are humans still evolving? The simple answer is yes. Even if the changes are not obvious, experts believe that about 9% of our genes are undergoing rapid evolution as we speak. The genes most affected by natural selection are those involving the immune system, sexual reproduction, and sensory perception. Lactose intolerance is one example of natural selection. Believe it or not, we are the only species that doesn't become lactose intolerant as we grow up. According to experts, this seemed to have happened when cattle became domesticated in Europe centuries ago. Another example is the sickle hemoglobin gene, which occurs in people who live in certain regions of Africa and other areas where malaria is an endemic. This gene mutation makes people who have it more resistant to malaria. While they can still contract the disease, they are less likely to die from it. Whereas somebody from the United States, we're going to go over there, we are more likely to contract malaria, as well as more likely to die from it. And the mutation probably happened over hundreds of generations as a result of them having a constant exposure to the malaria and surviving it. Think of it like pesticides and bugs. Even in one generation, bugs can become resistant to pesticides, like insects. They can become resistant to pesticides, and they will pass that resistance on through their gene mutations. So what have genes got to do with it? The mechanisms of evolution operate at the genomic level. Changes in DNA sequences affect the composition and expression of our genes, the basic units of inheritance. To understand how different species have evolved, we have to look at the DNA sequences in their genomes. Our evolutionary history is written into our genome. The human genome looks the way it does because of all the genetic changes that affected our ancestors, all the way back to mitochondrial Eve. When DNA and genes in different species look very similar, this is usually taken as evidence of them sharing ancestors or inbreeding with one another. For example, the fruit fly, they share much of their DNA. 75% of genes that cause diseases in humans are also found in the fruit fly. Now, DNA that accumulates changes over time, some of these changes can be beneficial and provide a selective advantage for an organism. Other changes may be harmful if they affect an important everyday function as a result. Some genes do not change much, and they are said to be conserved. Now, different types of evolution. There's 3, I believe. There's convergent evolution, which is when the same adaptations evolve independently, but under similar selection pressures. So, like, you have a species of, say, cat in the Eastern Hemisphere, or the Northern Hemisphere, and a species of cat in the Southern Hemisphere, right? Different places, different challenges, different lifestyles altogether, but under similar pressures. So they're going to have, they may adapt to evolve some of the same evolutionary traits in order to combat those pressures that they're facing in life. So, for example, flying insects, birds, and bats have all evolved the ability to fly, but independently of each other. Now, coevolution, which it's when 2 species or groups of species have evolved alongside each other, where one adapts to changes in the other, kind of symbiotically. For example, flowering plants and pollinating bees or pollinating insects. You know, they've evolved alongside each other, but they kind of depend on one another. And when one changes, the other has to adapt to those changes. So that leads into adaptive radiation, which is when a species splits into a number of new forms, when a charge in the environment makes new resources available or creates new environmental challenges. So take, for example, those Galapagos finches and how they have the different shaped beaks and the different tensile of their beaks. It was because they were subjected to a new environmental challenge and they had to adapt. And those that didn't adapt died off. Now, evolution of modern humans. The origin of modern humans has probably been the most debated issue in evolutionary biology for at least the last few decades. Where did we come from? Our evolutionary history is written into our genome. The human genome, it looks the way it does because of all the genetic changes that we've had over the millennia that we've been around. The exact origin of modern humans has actually been a long topic of debate. They don't, you know, you have the theological side, you have the scientific side, and then you have the middle, which everybody's kind of tossing everything up in the air and hoping to come down with an answer. So modern humans, Homo sapiens, the species, that's what we are. And in Latin, it means wise man. Our species is the only surviving species of the genus Homo, but where we came from has been a topic of much debate. So it's believed to be that modern humans originated in Africa within the last 200,000 years and evolved from their most likely recent common ancestor, Homo erectus, which means upright man in Latin. Homo erectus is an extinct species of human that lived between 1.9 million and 135,000 years ago, roughly. Historically, 2 key models have been put forward to explain the evolution of Homo sapiens. These are the out of Africa model and the multi-regional model. The out of Africa model is currently the most widely accepted model. It proposes that Homo sapiens evolved in Africa before migrating across the world. On the other hand, the multi-regional model proposes that the evolution of Homo sapiens took place in a number of places over a long period of time. The intermingling of the different populations eventually led to being narrowed down to one single Homo sapiens species that we see today. So, like, you have the Neanderthals that were in Europe. You have Homo erectus, Homo habilis, and can't remember the other name. but it's whatever Lucy was. I can't remember her specific name for that. But you got all these different little branches that kind of branch into each other, and then just, through inbreeding, they just kind of become one. So, but this is very, very much still an active area of research, however. The current genomic evidence supports a single out-of-Africa migration of modern humans rather than the multi-regional model. So, you have mitochondrial Eve again, where she may not have been the very first human, but she's the one that they can track all the mitochondrial DNA back to. So now she's branching out, and now, through migration, they're moving out, they're coming down into the Australia areas, they're coming up into the Europe areas of Africa, they're coming around, Asia, up into the Caucasus Mountains, and then eventually over the land bridge that was present from Siberia to Alaska. Although studies of the genomes of the extinct hominids, Neanderthals, and Denisovans suggest that there was some mixing of genomes, 1 to 3% with humans in Europe and Asia, this interbreeding between two previously separated populations is called an admixture and results in a mixing of genes between the populations. So what's the evidence for this out of Africa theory? Well, again, I allude to mitochondrial Eve. Genetic studies tend to support the out of Africa model. The highest levels of genetic variation in humans are found in Africa. In fact, there is more genetic diversity in Africa compared with the rest of the world put together. In addition, the origin of modern DNA in the mitochondria, which is the powerhouses of our cells, it has been tracked back to just one African woman who lived between 50,000 and 500,000 years ago. Her name would be mitochondrial Eve. And I know that's such a broad time frame to really kind of narrow it down to, but that's the best that they can give through the DNA sequencing. So our genomes are a combination of DNA from both our mother and our father. Okay. However, mitochondrial DNA, it comes solely from our mother. And this is because the female egg contains large amounts of mitochondrial DNA, where the male sperm contains just a tiny amount. And the sperm use their small amount of mitochondrial DNA to power their race to the egg before fertilization. So once a sperm merges with an egg, all the sperm's mitochondria are destroyed, which boils down to only the mother's side survives from generation to generation. Mitochondrial DNA has been extensively used by evolutionary biologists as it is easier to extract the DNA found in the nucleus. However, mitochondrial Eve wasn't the first or only woman on the earth at the time. She was simply the point from which all modern generations of humans have appeared to have grown, basically saying that's where they can narrow it back to, which definitely was probably not the first human, like they say. Evolutionary biologists think that most likely reason for this is because of an evolutionary bottleneck, which occurred during the time Eve was alive. This is when the majority of a species suddenly dies out, perhaps due to a sudden catastrophe, bringing it to the brink of extinction, say an ice age 80,000 some odd years ago, okay? So if mitochondrial Eve was one of the few women to survive this, then that could explain why her matrilineal mitochondrial DNA ended up being passed along so many different generations. Similarly, DNA from the Y chromosome is only passed on from fathers to sons. And an evolutionary tree relating all present-day male individuals also supports the out of Africa model. So, moving out of Africa, evidence shows that the first wave of humans to move out of Africa did not have too much success on their travels. At times it appears that they were on the brink of extinction, dwindling to as few as possibly 10,000. I mean, literally on the cusp of extinction. And the eruption of a supervolcano, Mount Toba in Sumatra 70,000 years ago, may have led to a nuclear winter followed by a 1,000-year ice age. This sort of event would have put an immense pressure on humans to survive. Again, the body is going to adapt to the scarcity of resources, and this is where Pardon me, let me get a drink of water real quick. This is where the evolutionary traits start getting passed along, not only through nature, but nurture. Because you're not only teaching these surviving abilities to the next generation and the next generation, but there's certain markers in your genetic sequence that are going to adapt to better survive it as well. It may have, this sort of event may have put immense pressure on humans, and it may be that humans were only able to survive these extreme conditions through cooperating with each other. Big word there, cooperation. This may have led to the formation of close family groups or tribes, and the development of some of the modern human behaviors we are familiar with today, such as cooperation. There's that word. Between 80,000 and 50,000 years ago, another wave of humans migrated out of Africa. These humans are likely to have been modern in terms of their appearance and behavior. Due to their newly cooperative behavior, they were more successful at surviving and covered the whole world in a relatively short period of time. As they migrated, they would have encountered earlier primitive humans, eventually replacing them, Neanderthals, Homo habilis, Homo erectus. Genetically, the 6 billion people of today's world vary very, very little from these earlier Homo sapiens that ventured out of Africa. Initial studies of DNA from the mitochondria of Neanderthals, and yes, the word is Neanderthals, not thals, by the way. Initial studies of the DNA from the mitochondria of Neanderthals showed that their mitochondrial DNA looks quite different to that of modern humans, suggesting that Homo neanderthalis and Homo sapiens did not interbreed. That's just a suggestion, it's not fact. Now, sequencing the Neanderthal genome. In 2010, scientists from Germany and the USA sequenced the DNA of an entire Neanderthal genome. They also identified another archaic human group called Denisovan, named after the Siberian cave in which the fossil finger from which the DNA was obtained was discovered. In 2013, they obtained a more refined Neanderthal genome sequence from a 50,000-year-old Neanderthal toe bone found in the same cave in southern Siberia. Nowadays, many of us carry a small fraction of DNA from our archaic Neanderthal and Denisovan ancestors. This shared DNA could have shaped our individual susceptibility to modern-day diseases or adaptations to new environments and climates. Scientists have found 9 Neanderthal genes in living humans, known to be associated with susceptibilities to conditions such as type 2 diabetes, lupus, and Crohn's disease. It has also been shown that the high altitude adaptation in Tibetans may be a consequence of archaic Denisovan DNA sequence. In a region of DNA associated with hemoglobin concentration at high altitudes, because they have to be able, their blood has to be able to carry oxygen in a different way since the oxygen is so much thinner in that high altitude. Additional research is being carried out to investigate these links further. Now, here is a kind of bullet point thing about Darwin's theory of evolution by natural selection. So more individuals are produced each generation that can survive. And that comes with not just the evolution of our species as it is, but also the evolution of technologies and medicines and all of the such. So then there's phenotypic variation, which exists among individuals, and the variation is heritable, which means it gets passed along. Those individuals with heritable traits are better suited to the environment for which they will survive. So when they live in this environment and they get these inheritable traits passed along to them through nature, not nurture, but through nature, they're going to be better suited to, say, live in Alaska where their body needs to be more prone to being able to be cold. So when reproductive isolation occurs, new species will form. So you get these little groups of people, like the tribe in Mexico that I was talking about, and they have this isolation. And then you have this other one that's a Nordic, they live on a Nordic island, and a lot of the people there, it's a very isolated community that's been isolated on this island for a long time, but through the reproduction of just the same people, they have a common marker in their genome which causes them to have a medical deficiency that actually kills off a lot. And these are the basic tenets of evolution by natural selection as defined by Darwin. The following is a quote from Darwin. Variation is a feature of natural populations, and every population produces more progeny than its environment can manage. The consequences of this overproduction is that those individuals with the best genetic fitness for the environment will produce offspring that can more successfully compete in that environment. Thus, the subsequent generation will have a higher representation of these offspring. Darwin's theory of evolution fundamentally changed the direction of future scientific thought. It really did. And though it was built on growing a body of thought that began to question prior ideas about our natural world, the core of Darwin's theory is natural selection, a process that occurs over successive generations and is defined as the differential reproduction of genotypes. Natural selection requires heritable variation in a given trait and a differential survival and reproduction associated with the possession of that trait. Examples of natural selection are very well documented both through observation and through fossil records. Selection acts on the frequency of traits and can take the form of stabilizing, directional, or diversifying selection. And with that, I am finite. Can anybody hear me? Okay. For a second, it said my microphone was muted. I was like, I hope I didn't just give this whole thing.
Yeah, we've all been here, sitting here, wondering when you were going to start your talk.
So with that, we're going to take 10-minute break. We are going to come back for a talk back, but previous to us taking our break, I do have going out the door reading. It's called The Freedom to Doubt. The freedom to doubt is the freedom to doubt, to question, to be content to live in mystery is central to the liberal religious tradition. Like the process of evolution itself, the path that we follow, our practice, is not easy or simple. It is without its dead ends. It isn't without dead ends or disappointments. It doesn't guarantee that all of our conclusions will be final or that we will ever find an answer to all of our questions. But also, like the process of evolution, it is filled with great expressions of beauty and awe that are sometimes born of great struggle and other times come as an unexpected grace. So thank you for listening to me ramble for 20 some odd minutes, and we'll see you back here in a few.
Thanks, Rick.